Okay, so we want to welcome all the comadres here tonight. Thank you for joining us for the month of May. This is a continuation of our Las Comadres speaker series, and we are happy to introduce you to Maritere Bellas, who is with us here tonight. And Mari is going to tell us about herself. Mari?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. And Maria, thank you for this, to you and Las Comadres for this opportunity. My name is Maritere Rodriguez Velas. I'm a book author, parenting topic expert, advocate of raising bilingual, multilingual, and multicultural children. I'm also a podcast host. I have a podcast in Spanish called Mamás 411 Podcast, a speaker and a parenting social media influencer. We're here to talk about raising bilingual and multicultural children and to give you information, ideas, answer questions, suggestions that can help you in your family's journey. The agenda for the next, hour, 45 minutes or so, I'm going to ask about why am I in this journey, why raise a bilingual child, the benefits and the myths, raising a multicultural family, how to start, common struggles, tips and suggestions, and we will have Q&A along the way. I think we decided to do that. So let's start with my journey. I grew up in Puerto Rico. At home, we spoke Spanish, but at school, we spoke English, and most of our subjects were taught in English. By the time I graduated from high school, I was completely bilingual. I then had the opportunity to travel to Europe, and I studied French in Switzerland for 2 years. At 18 years old, I realized the value of communicating in more than one language. Children around me spoke 3 or 4 languages without skipping a beat, and I was fascinated by the cultures and the richness of being multicultural. Years later, I became a mom, and I remembered that richness, that value, that gift. I have 2 children that I raised with 3 cultures and 2 languages. My husband is Greek, I'm Puerto Rican, and we are all American. At the time, over 25 years ago, there were no resources for parents like me that wanted to preserve the culture and instill the love of the Spanish language. There were no children's books in Spanish, no books that could guide me as a parent, trying to find a balance between all the languages and the cultures. So to that end, I started writing a column for immigrant parents for La Opinión newspaper in Los Angeles. It was syndicated for 12 years, and it also ran in Chicago for 5 years. I also wrote for national publications, Ser Padres, which I'm happy to say is still around, and Healthy Kids en Español. But you can only get these publications at the pediatrician's office. That led to my first book, Raising Bilingual Children, an ebook published in English and in Spanish in 2014 by the renowned editorial Simon & Schuster. And then came in 2016, Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, Raising Bicultural Children, which is in print and also in ebook format. My first bilingual children's book is Luisito's Island, La Isla de Luisito, and it was published in 2018. All these books have received the International Latino Book Award, which makes me very proud. My second bilingual children's book was published recently, last December, and it is the first in a series entitled Junito's Adventures, Las Aventuras de Junito. And this book is called I Have a Secret, Yo Tengo un Secreto. And these are books for 4 to 8 years old children. Why should we raise bilingual children? There are many reasons to raise bilingual children, and they vary from one family to the next. Mostly, we want our children to communicate with family back in our native country. We want them to learn about the culture through language, and we want to preserve their heritage through language. Children today are being raised in a multicultural world, doesn't matter where they live. The world is bilingual, multilingual, and not necessarily monolingual. Scientific studies have been released that promote bilingualism and its benefits. And I'm happy to share some of these articles. If you send me an email, I will send you a whole bunch of links that you can read about this, because you might be interested, whether you're starting, you're in the process of, they might be of interest to you. Let's talk about the benefits. The first and most important one is the brain function. The brain power required to be a bilingual speaker improves the cognitive function linked to critical thinking and problem solving. Speaking of cognitive benefits, bilingual people are constantly switching from one language to another in their minds, which results in cognitive benefits. This helps bilingual children to be effective at tasks that involve problem solving and critical thinking. People who speak more than one language also have better listening skills, can monitor change in their environment better than monolinguals, and have improved concentration. Bilinguals also have enhanced memory and show signs of greater flexibility and creativity. Connecting with more people is also a benefit. Being able to connect with more people is an incredible reason for anyone to learn another language. The ability to talk with someone in her own language is very important for relationship building. Speaking a second language allows children to communicate with more people in their neighborhood, their community, and throughout the world. We gain a new perspective when we're bilingual or multilingual. Learning another language gives kids the opportunity to learn about new cultures and ways of life. Speaking another language exposes us to the traditions, religions, art, and history of the people who speak that language. This helps us gain an appreciation for others and their cultures, and can increase our respect and empathy for others. Studies show that children who have studied another language are more open toward the culture associated with that language. There's also cultural benefit. Bilingual children develop a strong sense of their cultural identity, which can improve their mental health and establish a strong sense of self-worth. New studies of health, speaking of health, new studies show that bilingual people recover quicker from strokes and experience slower onset of dementia. Another benefit is traveling the world. Bilinguals can learn about new places and experience them more fully when they speak the local language. Speaking the language of the place where we're visiting allows us to navigate more easily and interact with the people and places more fully. Learning a second language also opens the door for studying or working abroad. Improve the first language is also a benefit. Research shows that when kids learn a second language, they learn important aspects of their own language that they otherwise might not have learned. Learning a second language gives new perspective on the first one and on language in general. This increases appreciation of language and the ability to communicate. Studies have shown that language learners transfer their skills from one language to another, and students who learn a second language often have increased vocabulary in English. Career opportunities, job opportunities is another amazing benefit. Bilingual people have a range of careers opportunities not available to monolingual speakers. For example, you can travel the world as a translator, a writer, or work for a global company. 1/2 to 2/3 of adults around the world speak at least 2 languages. In today's global society, a child who grows up bilingual will have many advantages in adulthood when they're adults. Bilingual and biliterate people have significantly more job opportunities than monolinguals. Another benefit, if you're raised bilingual, you might want to raise bilingual kids. Speaking another language means that someday, perhaps, bilinguals can choose to raise their own kids bilingually. What a gift to continue through the generations, especially if the second language is a heritage language that keeps the family connected to their culture and history. Number 9, we're ready for a third language. What if a child would like to add a third language later on? The more languages a person learns, the easier it becomes. Studies show that bilingual people gain an aptitude for languages and have an easier time if they choose to learn a third language. And number 10, lifetime benefits. Being bilingual will have a lasting impact throughout a person's life. Bilingual people have been shown to maintain their mental health for longer. Learning a second language can protect the brain against Alzheimer's disease. Brain studies have shown that bilingual people's brain tends to function better and for longer after developing the disease. On average, bilingual people had the disease delayed by 4 years compared to monolinguals. Also, better literacy skills. Biliteracy is the ability to read and write in 2 or more languages. Research shows that bilingual children are able to develop stronger literacy skills if they can learn to read in both languages they speak. In a meta-analysis evaluating reading growth in bilingual students, studies show that children in bilingual classrooms saw greater gains than children in English-only classrooms. Another study has found that still children that are going to a dual immersion school outperform their monolingual peers on state reading tests, and that's pretty important. Bilingual kids have also been shown to start reading earlier in both languages, earlier than their monolingual peers. I don't really remember. I know some, you said that some of the people in this group were already raising bilingual, but I hope that these benefits will help you. And this is a good time to ask for questions, and then we'll go into the myths.
Yes, so if anyone who has questions, please put them on the chat. Mari, can you talk about, explain the difference between bilingual and bicultural? Because sometimes people think it's the same thing. Is it the same thing?
No.
Okay.
It's not the same thing. I mean, you can be bilingual when you are fluent in two more languages. You could be a monolingual person and be bicultural because mom and dad are from a different country. So you know what I'm saying? So you don't necessarily have to be bilingual to be bicultural. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. That's sort of like if your mother is from Puerto Rico and your father is from Mexico, you're bicultural. But if you only speak English at home, you're only, monolingual.
Exactly. Very good.
Okay, Mirta has a question for us. She put down, espérate, let me see, hang on. Well, Dora first. Dora put down, what are some of the tips and advice for parents that want to raise bilingual children? And this Mirta's question is about the same. My husband and I speak Spanish at home all the time, but my kids have daycare, and they respond to us in English. So what tips do you have to get them to speak Spanish to us?
I'm going to go through that in a minute, and then we could go back to those questions because I think in the next part of my presentation, I may be able to answer. I may already answer that, but I'm happy to go back into and give some more specific suggestions to both of them.
Okay, perfect.
So let's talk about the myths. There's 5 myths. In my book, Raising Bilingual Children, I mentioned 5 common myths about raising bilingual children. And for this, I interviewed a lexicographer and language expert. He's been around for over 30 years talking on the subject. His name is Dr. Delphine Carbonell Basset. And the first one that he mentions is confusion. Debates that a bilingual child's brain will get confused with so many different words spoken in so many different languages, and that learning 2 or more languages can delay the child's communication skills. The fact is that language starts as soon as the baby is born. Really, since the baby is inside the belly, we should be talking to him or her. And the brain, because of its plasticity, will adapt to whatever is exposed to. The more stimuli, the better for the language, and the children can tell the difference between one language and another language pretty soon. There's really no confusion there. Studies have also shown that all of us are born with a multilingual brain. So then The second myth, the cognitive impact. It's the idea that the kids' cognitive development will be negatively affected by teaching them 2 or more languages at the same time. The fact is that so many studies now show that the opposite is true. 2 language children have the advantage over 1 language children who have only one way of communicating, and thus less stimulus for neuronal development. This misconception has deprived millions in the United States of the blessing of a 2-language education. The third myth is start early. A child must start being bilingual from day 1 or else he won't make it. Well, the fact is, of course, being bilingual right from the start is the best under perfect conditions, but perfect conditions situations are few and far between, as we all know. It is never too late to expose a child to another language. The brain's potential to acquire speech is still unknown, but it is boundless. So I will even go a step further. It is never too late for anyone at any age to learn another language. In fact, the cognitive benefits increase the older you are, to the point that I'm always urging elderly people to study another language in order to keep mentally fit and alert. The fourth myth is the refusal to speak at home. Some children refuse to learn 2 languages and prefer one over the other. The fact is, some children refuse to eat vegetables and prefer chocolate. In this situation does occur, it is up to the parents and teachers to stick to their plan. I will talk about this plan in a minute, and use both languages no matter what resistance they encounter, with lovingly, of course. I always say consistency and flexibility are key, and always encourage parents to use a combination of the natural method of language learning with respectful parenting. I call it naturally bilingual. And number 5, the United States is 1 language country. That's a myth. The fact is, many languages are spoken in this country and many people do not speak English. However, there are millions of people who are bilingual, either completely or to some degree. And the United States now has the possibility of becoming bilingual in English and Spanish. Those who speak both owe it to their children to expose them to those languages, or at least try to. Questions?
So we have a couple of questions about the tips. How do they get them to, the kids are speaking English, the parents speak Spanish, the kids are talking English. So how do they get their kids to start talking Spanish? And Lourdes was saying that she had raised babies 1 and 2 bilingual, but in the 3rd pregnancy, since it was hard and whatever, they started just speaking English. And now that the kids are teenagers, they don't know how to introduce the Spanish back.
Yeah, it becomes, the first thing that I always tell parents is we have to lower our expectations. We have the best of intentions. We come up with a family language plan, and this comes a little bit later in the presentation. But the idea is that mom and dad, spouse, partners, come up with a family language plan that they will follow. And in that plan is the strategies to follow. So for example, 1 parent, 1 language, or the minority language at home. This happens if both mom and dad speak Spanish, which is the case of, I forget, I think Dora or Myrta. And then we have to realize our children are growing up in an English dominant world. So we need to lower our expectations. We need to just, take it 1 day at a time, try to follow that plan as much as we can, try to make it as fun as we can. There's so many resources out there to help support the language learning that gives you suggestions and ideas to make it fun. Use the cooking, the food, the music, expose them to all that. When they're teenagers, they are more, what are their interests? Do they like to read comics? Then, there's a place I can send you to, a Lingo Zing, that has comic books in Spanish. And maybe they'll like to, you can introduce that to them now. Oh, I have this great app. We can get some comics in Spanish, and you'll get them reading that way. If they have younger kids, maybe you engage your older kid to read to them in Spanish. Ay, nene, can you read to the kids today in Spanish? I have to do this, that, or the other. Kids love to be teachers. And perhaps you can get, without really saying, I want you to practice your Spanish by reading to the younger siblings. You don't have to say that. You say, I need you to read to the kids in Spanish. I don't have time to do it. Can you please help mommy that way? You don't even have to say that you're trying for him to learn it or to practice it. So, there's a lot of fun things that we can do. Remember that teenagers are already hormonal. They're going through all kinds of changes. So let's not add the stress of our frustration because they're not answering to us in Spanish. If you talk to them all the way till now, they are bilingual. They are bilingual. If they happen to be going to a Spanish-speaking country, they're going to know how to communicate. So I say don't feel so stressed about it. They also feel our stress. I lived it. I lived it. And it was really hard for us because, we didn't have the support that parents have today. So be patient. You want them to connect out of love. Also, a teenager, you can have an in-depth conversation with a teenager about the benefits and the advantages. You can sit down with your teenager in the computer and Google why my parents want me to be bilingual, and you'll find a whole bunch of reasons. There was some of the ones I just mentioned that they're food for, they're conversational for you and your child. He'll understand. It's not the same as talking to a 4-year-old, but a 13-year-old will understand. So, think about that as well. And yes, the little kids, they're going to speak Spanish at home. They're going to go outside the door and speak English. They're going to want to speak English because they don't want to feel different. So with a lot of love and a lot of understanding and a lot of encouragement and finding the fun ways, the fun activities to practice, maybe instead of every day, you choose 2 days a week. That's the way we did it. We divided our languages by week. So we did everything in English 3 times a week because that was the language that they spoke outside. And that was the language that we communicated with my husband. He didn't speak Spanish. And then we had Spanish the other 2 days. And perhaps in the weekend, I would put music. I will cook something that, a recipe from Abuelita. I would talk to them about the whole anecdote of the recipe in Spanish, the ingredients in Spanish. But I kind of like would, it's called, now there's a name for it called time and place. I didn't know it was called then because no one had, done the research and given it a name. Same thing with one parent, one language. We did it by instinct. Now there's that method, that approach. So there's a lot of ways out there, and you just, there's so many online communities that you can belong to that can give you the support that you need. There's a lot of experts out there that I'm happy to share with you. I can help you in any way to try to develop that plan. And so don't be discouraged. You're doing the best you can, and that's okay. Us parents, caregivers, godmothers, we all do the best we can. And that's what we need to remember. And that's what the children are going to remember. My son is 30 years old. He looks back, says, Mom, how did you do this with no resources? And his Spanish is not perfect. He can carry a conversation better than my daughter can, but he doesn't have the grammar. So it's not perfect, but you know what? My children are bilingual. If they are dropped into a Spanish language country, they will be fine. They will be like locals in no time.
They'll be able to defend themselves. Yes.
That's what you have to remember, that maybe it doesn't have to be perfect. If I had gone back and I had a dual immersion school, I would have definitely put my children in a dual immersion school to make sure that they will be reading. But also remember that in my day, there was no children's books in Spanish. My sister sent me whatever little that she had from Puerto Rico, but none of the libraries and none of the bookstores around me had books. And there are so many books out there now.
Yes.
So so many Latino authors that need your help getting the books. You know, develop a culture of reading at home, and kids now can see themselves. They can see their Latino faces in the stories that they read. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Maritere, tell us, you know, the whole process of raising your children and talking Spanish at home, or, you know, or let's say if you're biracial and you're talking Greek and Spanish and or something like that. This is in the home. So in your plan that you're going to come up with next, can you also talk about, you know, are you expecting that what you teach them at home, they will take and use at school, or, you know, like.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I mean, and if it happens, hey, power to you. I talk to a lot of parents all the time, and they tell me the same story, which is why I wrote this book. You know, I have a secret, tengo un secreto. This is Junito, and Junito is in kindergarten, first grade, and he doesn't want to speak. He comes home and he tells his parents, I don't want to speak Spanish. Don't talk to me in Spanish. Because of that, kids don't want to feel different. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want to, you know, even sometimes kids have been bullied by whatever other language they speak. They don't want that. So it's
sort of becoming bilingual in secret, like Junito.
Well, but the secret is that he is fluent in both languages because mom and dad speak Spanish at home. He just doesn't want the other kids to know. Sometimes, and then I introduce a character in the book that is the one that helps Junito realize what his superpower is and how wonderful that he's fluent in another language. And that's the teacher. The teacher that is monolingual tells him, I wish I was like you, Junie. I wish I could speak Spanish fluently. And that kind of like, sometimes we parents tell our kids this, you know, the same thing 1,000 times and they don't hear it. But here comes another person they trust, another person that they love, and tells them the same thing we just told them, you know, 1,000 times, and it clicks. So, you know, that's another suggestion. That's why in the plan, I also suggest that it takes a village. So everyone in the child's circle should be supportive of your goal of raising bilingual, so that you have that support of the grandparents, the teachers, the neighbors, the friends. Everybody is on the same page and everybody can support you, because that will be great for the kids to see. And also expose them to friends that also speak Spanish. You know, that helped us a lot. Neither my husband and I had family. So we had a group of friends that we met along, you know, whether it was by, you know, work or what have you, or in the neighborhood. And they were Argentinians, Peruvian, Mexican, Puerto Rican, and my husband was the token Greek. And so we all, to this day, we all are good friends. We all had children the same age. So our children grew up with all those cultures, the food, the traditions, the talking, the different accents of all the Latin American countries. It was awesome. And so that was my support. I didn't have anything else. And you know what? It wasn't perfect, but it worked. And I think that perhaps that's why I'm so passionate about it, because now there's so many reasons and ways to raise bilingual or multilingual kids and multicultural kids. So it's something that we should consider for sure. Mm-hmm. So let me go about the multicultural.
Yes, tell us about how to make a plan.
So because we talked about also raising a multicultural family, as I mentioned earlier, my children grew up with 3 cultures and 2 languages. In those days, it wasn't always easy, but we did our best to honor the Greek, Puerto Rican, and American cultures at home. We mostly follow our instincts, as there were no books or internet, no online communities that would support. We also didn't have family near us. So we have to be creative and find ways to expose our children to cultures as much as possible. Luckily, in Los Angeles, it's rich in cultures. So we found a Greek community. They host Greek festivals every year. So we would take the kids to learn about the music and the food and their dances. My mother-in-law taught me how to make a few Greek dishes, so I would cook that. And they would also talk to the children every week and visited often. As far as the Puerto Rican side, our kids grew up visiting Puerto Rico every year, and they were immersed in the people for 2 months out of the year. They were immersed in the people, the food, the music, and the traditions. We were blessed to have this opportunity, and they knew it. At home in California, we had Greek days, Puerto Rican days, and American days, where our daily activities would revolve around that culture, and it would include the food, the books, the music, the talks with grandparents, for example. The easiest culture, of course, was the American culture, as they were living in an American world. In addition to these 3 cultures, like I mentioned, we developed that group of Latin American friends. I truly believe that all these cultures enrich my children's lives and have contributed to the young adults they are today. Respectful of others, empathetic, tolerant, inclusive, and appreciative of others' differences. So how do we start? You make a decision with your spouse of your partner about a family. I call it a language family plan, which can also be a language and culture family plan. Both of you should be on the same page and supporting the language and the culture. Decide on the method. Like I mentioned, there's OPOL, one parent, one language, the minority language at home, which is MLAH, and time and place. This means that maybe 1 hour a day, you play with your child in that minority language. This works well with monolingual parents or parents that are not that fluent in Spanish, for example. In your plan, include cultural exposure. For example, you can add days of the week when everything is in English and the other days everything is in Spanish, or whatever the other culture your family honors. It takes a village. Involve everyone in the life of the child in this plan. Family, relatives, neighbors, teachers, friends. You will need everyone's support. Start as early as possible. Since they are babies, it becomes part of their daily routines, and they don't tend to fight it. It's like brushing their teeth 3 times a week. But remember what I said earlier, language learning can begin at any age. Make it fun. Should not be a chore. It should not be an obligation. Provide language exposure opportunities, books, music, food, playgroups, video games, virtual play days these days. And use technology. They have apps, games, movies, YouTube, virtual language classes. Read, and read some more. Have books everywhere. Create a home library that includes books in all the languages your child is learning. Today, there are many books available. You can Google Latino bilingual children's book authors, and all of us will pop up, or Spanish language children's books. Even subscription boxes, if you don't know them, you should. Booklandia box, Hola Amigo box, Soul Book box, Spanish 6 box, Lelu USA, We Are Rooted, are just to name a few. Keep an open mind, communicate, share, and listen, and ask for help. Talk to other parents, teachers, friends, professional help, bilingual experts. There are many online services that offer help for a fee, or sometimes we give out things for free. My Bilingual Child Corner, Live as a Second Language, La Leo Bilingual Therapy, Billy Kids. There's a whole bunch of them. Stick to the plan, stay consistent but flexible. Some kids might need more structure, more organization. And remember that this plan should be evaluated every year. Remember that children grow, their interests change, they're in developmental stages change. We should adjust our family language and cultural plan to accommodate the child's own development. Any questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions that they sent in about the plan. If you have a 2-year-old with ASD and speech delay, should you just stick to one language or continue with the 2?
You know, that's a really good question. And I am going to suggest that you talk to an expert on that. Supposedly, research says no, but I don't know if no means there's a degree of delay. I don't know what the degree of delay is in your child. So I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I am not a speech pathologist. So I would rather you send me an email, and I will connect you with Claudia Johnson. She is the founder of the platform. It's called La Leo Bilingual Therapy, and she would be a perfect person to answer that question for you. And I don't know if you want to write my email address. It's mrbellas@gmail.com.
I'm writing it down.
And thank you for asking. I think your child is going to be okay, and I think you can definitely introduce the 2 languages, but I would rather you talk to Claudia and have that expert tell you otherwise.
Okay. Okay, so we have a couple of other questions. We already talked about that one. I'm just trying to okay, so the idea about being, bicultural, so you're teaching them 2 languages, and, you're teaching them about their Latino history, and you're also teaching them about being an American and stuff. How do the parents find balance? Because it's one thing to teach your kid, but, kids will do what their parents do. And sometimes we say one thing, but we do something else, and that's what the kids see. So if mommy and daddy are saying, speak Spanish, speak Spanish, speak Spanish, and then you step out the door and they only speak English, mommy and daddy only speak English, or let's say somebody in the home, complains about, the Americans have no respect for the family, or does some bad mouthing and stuff. How do you balance, because that, the kids see that. So how do the adults balance being Latino, being American, and being a good role model?
Parents are the most important role model for the kids. And we have to treat it just like, discipline. Have the same message from mom and dad. And we need to accept that they are in an English dominant world. This is the American culture that they're growing in. Some of them are born here, so they are Americans, even if we're not. I mean, I am because I'm from Puerto Rico, but you know what I'm saying. So the bad mouthing the culture and the language is not the way to go. If we want them to accept, respect, embrace, connect with our Spanish language, we need to do all those things with the English language. And pretty soon, kids are super smart. They pretty soon realize that mom and dad go outside, like you say, and they speak English. But they're going to realize it's because everyone else speaks English. but very, as depending on their maturity level, we in casa, we speak Spanish. And please remind me again, or tell me in Spanish. If they want to come home and speak English, okay, tell me in English, but I want you to tell me in Spanish as well. In a very nice way, no threatening, no criticism. Ay, ya me estás hablando español, inglés otra vez. No, 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 no. We don't do that. And the fact of the matter is that, we have to accept that this is where they live. And the better that, when we embrace where we live and the culture and the language, they're going to do it as well. So if we're a good example for them, just to give you an example, let's say mom doesn't speak English, and she doesn't, even when she walks out the door, she doesn't know the language, she doesn't speak it. So here is an opportunity for that teenager, that 7-year-old, that 8-year-old, where the mom can say, you know what, mijo, how about if once a week you sit down with me and you teach me some words or some sentences in English? I would learn from you because I know you're so good at it. So by you showing that you want to learn the English language, he's going to continue on with the Spanish because you're giving him a good example. So that's what we have to do, and stop the criticism. I know there are things about the culture that, we don't appreciate, but we can't say that in front of the kids.
Sorry.
I can't hear
you. Yes. So I know that you put forth a plan, which was a very good plan. What sort of let's say like summer tips, because now the world is opening up and soon people are going to be a little bit less restrictive and people are going to be able to go out. So what other travel tips, let's say, can we use as we take the kids out, and really do something, as so what can we do while we're traveling to continue fostering this bilingual and this bicultural plan?
Well, first of all, if you're not, I don't know how many people are venturing out these days. I think little by little we're trying to go on trips, but look,
you're a little low.
Oh. What I was going to say is that I don't know if people are venturing out traveling these days. But look, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. But look in your city's calendar of events. There should be cultural events there. Museum. I just talked about this in my little consejito this a little bit ago video. The cities have a calendar of events, of summer events, and most cities have cultural events there. So look for that. Libraries, parks, museums would have some kind of the exhibit that perhaps is from Mexico or from Colombia or a country, a Spanish-speaking country. Online, the museums, especially last year, we're doing a lot of exhibits online or tours to different countries.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, we can visit anywhere in the world. We do a tour and we do it in Spanish to a different country. But usually the area where we live will have some cultural event that we can help us nurture the love of culture. And if not, come up with it. Maybe there's a few parents that you're friends with, come up with reuniones, once a month. You all get together, you all cook, your Latin American food. The kids are listening to Spanish going on the whole time. How fun is that? And maybe do some games where the parents and the kids play games together and everything is in Spanish that day without even saying, oh, we're going to a place where we're going to speak Spanish. They'll get there and they'll see. It always helps the kids when they're around other kids that are also in the same plan that the plan at home. And that helps a lot too.
Before we finish, I wanted to ask you about your books. I love the title, Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie. I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, and it's literally both sides.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. My son came up with that name. He's like,
oh, look at that.
Let's look at the food, because I wanted to come up with how do I do an analogy of that the English and the Spanish or the cultures can live together. And he's like, well, what about using the food? Arroz con pollo, everyone knows in what that is. And apple pie is so American. So that's how that title happened.
Now, is this book still available? This is for adults and showing them,
It's for parents, and it's a guide for parents. There's a lot of interviews in there. The first chapter is really about, the stages that we all go through when we move to this country. And that's really helpful if we want to help sometimes we come here and our kids are left behind and then they come. And it's really, a compilation of stories. I interview a lot of parents. I talk about discipline, the American way and the Latino way. And I wanted to show that regardless of our socioeconomic background, we all have a hard time when we move to this country and we try to balance the American way and the Latino way. So I have also some great stories. Jorge Ramos' story is in my book. The TV anchor, and Mili Quesada, the singer Tony Plana is in here. So it's, it really helps to realize that we're all in this together. We all have struggle, and we can make it. So that's what that book is about.
And your two children's books grew out of that love?
Luisito's Island, La Isla de Luisito. And this is about a little Puerto Rican boy that has to leave the island after Huracán Maria, and all the places that he misses from the island. He tells his new friends. And it's a story about friendship and hope and all that. And then, like I mentioned, the Luisito book is the first in a series. The next one is coming up hopefully next year. And this is called I Have a Secret, Tengo un Secreto. And Junito learns how to love speaking Spanish and being fluent in both languages.
So how can we as parents, as Latinos, help support authors who are, trying to represent us, and doing the bilingual books? And because I see that sometimes like an author would put out a book, like let's say like Meg Medina, she would put out a book and you have to wait like a whole year for the Spanish translation. Although now she's getting, now that she's being recognized and she won the Pura Velpre Award, now her books are like released simultaneously. Pero sometimes, unless the book starts off bilingual, and if it's in English, you got to wait like a whole year. And then maybe your publisher will do it in Spanish.
Well, which is why there's a lot of Latino-owned smaller presses that are starting up. Con Todo Press, Cielito Lindo Books. They're all publishing their own books because there is a need for bilingual books out there, not necessarily because of the Latino family, but also there is a large percentage of monolingual parents raising bilingual children. And the bilingual book is a great tool for them to read to mom and dad, and mom and dad understand what the story is about because they see it in English there. But before we go, I wanted to address common struggles because I know that a couple of them have come here, and I just want parents to know this. When they refuse to speak the language, this is the very common. Don't get defensive. Keep in mind maturity level and developmental level. Give simple explanations, simple commands like, Can you repeat that to me in Spanish? And as he or she gets older, Google the way raising bilingual and read the reasons together. Always validate their emotions. It is important to understand that the child might not want to feel differently by speaking the minority language. As parents, we should also validate how we feel about the fact that our child doesn't want to speak our language. And talking to someone like me, for example, or any other expert out there, we can, reading the books, we can help you understand that there's a lot of other parents out there feeling the same way that you do, and that it's okay. Try to speak only in the target language. Try to be consistent by speaking in the language you want him to learn. Use language as a connector. Develop a language routine around the language, at dinner, at bedtime, at play. Keep in mind the child's developmental stage. Our learning language efforts may vary depending on the developmental stage. Make sure you foster a bond with the minority language at any age. Don't correct him in a judgmental manner if he or he is not speaking proper Spanish or French. Be kind and validate his efforts. It is normal to mix languages if he's getting two at home. It is okay to remind them nicely what language we want him to speak with us. Use culture to promote language. Play groups, weekly virtual talks with grandparents are so helpful. Maybe story times on Mondays in Spanish with the grandma. Even in a Zoom meeting, grandma can be reading a book in Spanish. Anytime that you go out, nature walks is a good opportunity to practice language. Role play, maybe your son or daughter have a great book that you like. Let's come up with it together and let's do a little play for the rest of the family. Board games, there's many board games in Spanish these days. Music, dance, and use technology. There's a lot out there that, of course, you monitor it, and you don't want your kid in a screen like they've been the last year, but they are very good. There's a lot of good content out there. So I just wanted to say that before.
No, that's wonderful. So are there any more questions before we close?
I see someone. Can you share a resource for compadres to help teach Spanish to neighbors and grandchildren? You know what? I have to think about that, but that's a good, the idea of the get together where everybody's speaking Spanish, like a dinner or a fiesta, whatever, that, it's helpful. And you can play board games, or you can play Pictionary, and all can be in Spanish. That might be a good way. And the grandkids and the grandparents, they have this amazing bond, and perhaps the reading can be done by abuelita in Spanish. That would really be something they will always remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. I think we're good. Is there any last words that you want to say, Mari?
I just want to thank you and Nora and Las Comadres for this opportunity, and for everyone that attended today. The questions were great. I really appreciate the time. As I mentioned before, my books can be a resource to you, and you can find them Amazon, Booklandia, Cinco Books, anywhere, Barnes or Noble. If you have additional questions you want to address privately, please email me. I do have a resource list that I'm happy to send you via email. I update it constantly, and it has from authors to books to apps to YouTube programs, everything in there. Remember that sharing our culture, our native language with our children shouldn't be a chore or a sacrifice. It should be something we want to do, because in my humble opinion, understanding and appreciating where we came from can help us get to where we are going. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've put down Maritere's website, her social addresses there, her email. If you want her resources list, please email her directly, and she will share that with you gladly. And everyone, please, where can we buy an autographed copy of your book?
Which one?
All those, because I was thinking for teacher gifts. That's what I was thinking. Sorry. Friend of the year teacher.
A friend of the year teacher gift.
If you send me an email, and we'll communicate that way. I'm happy to send them to you, signed. You can just buy them from me.
Okay, that's perfect. And again, her social addresses, her website is there. Email her for the resource list. Please fill out the evaluation form so we can have other wonderful guests like Maritere. So thank you so much, and take care of yourself, be safe, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night, everyone.